My brother, who took my wife from me 4 years ago, came back to visit. He laughed and said, "Still alone, loser?" My ex added, "And still just as ugly." Then my father stood up and said, "You're exactly who I was looking for. I have news for you." Their faces suddenly changed. I'm Daniel Harris, 34 years old, and I live in a small house on the outskirts of Denver. I work as a mechanic, nothing fancy, but I like it. 4 years ago, my world fell apart. My younger brother, Issen, ran off with my wife, Claire. They didn't just leave me. They mocked me as they did it. "You've always been a loser, Dan," Issen said. Claire just laughed and added, "I never should have married you." Since then, I've been alone, trying to move on. My father, Robert, is the only one who's always been there. He lives nearby in a house where we grew up. He's a tough guy, a man of few words but fair. He lost my mother, Helen, 3 years ago, and it changed him. Sometimes I catch him staring at old photos, lost in thought. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was on the couch watching football when the doorbell rang. I thought it was a neighbor with car trouble, but when I opened the door, there they were, Issen and Claire. Issen was wearing an expensive shirt, Claire in a dress that screamed money. I froze. "Hey, brother," Issen said with that smug smile I hate. "You look as pathetic as ever." Claire laughed. "Still alone, huh? Loser. And still just as ugly." I wanted to yell, tell him to get lost, but I couldn't. The pain from 4 years ago hit me like a tidal wave. Then I heard my father. I hadn't noticed him arrive, but he was standing in the living room doorway, his expression hard. "You're exactly who I was looking for," he said to Issen. His voice was calm, but something about it set my nerves on edge. "I have some news." Issen and Claire stopped smiling. They looked nervous, and I had no idea what was happening. My father looked at me. "Dan, sit down. This is important." We sat at the dining table. Issen and Claire tried to act normal, but you could tell something was off. My father stood, hands in his pockets. "I didn't want to do this like this," he said, staring at Issen. "But since you're here, it's time to talk straight." Issen frowned. "What are you talking about, Dad?" he asked, pretending to be relaxed. Claire shifted uncomfortably. My father sighed. "A month ago, I was diagnosed with cancer," he said bluntly. I felt like I'd been punched. "Cancer?" I muttered. He nodded. "Terminal. 2 months. 3 if I'm lucky." The silence was heavy. No one spoke for a moment. Claire broke it first. "I'm so sorry, Robert," she said, but it sounded fake. Issen said nothing, just stared at my father, calculating. My father raised a hand. "I'm not done," he said. "This isn't just about me. It's about what you two did." Issen and Claire tensed. I had no clue what he meant, but his tone told me it was serious. When Helen was sick, my father said there was a fund for her treatments. Money I saved for years. Money Dan and I scraped together, working overtime. That money was supposed to help her, but it disappeared. His voice carried anger now, and I know where it went. Issen tried to speak. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but he sounded nervous. My father cut him off. "I know everything, Issen. I know you and Claire spent it on cars, clothes, trips while Helen was dying without the treatment she needed." I couldn't breathe. Issen and Claire had stolen my mother's money? I looked at them, waiting for a denial, but Issen looked down, and Claire seemed to want to vanish. "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking. My father didn't flinch. "I have proof," he said. "Bank statements, transfers. I've known for years, but I wanted to believe you'd change. But coming here, mocking Dan Madonna, acting like you didn't destroy this family, that was too much." I couldn't believe it. Not only had they betrayed me with Claire, but they'd stolen the money that could have saved my mother. I felt rage, pain, everything mixed together. I wanted to scream, but my father glanced at me, signaling me to stay calm. "So," he said, looking at Issen, "I've made a decision. Everything I have, the house, the money, it's all good Dan when I'm gone. You, Issen, get nothing." Issen jumped up. "You can't do that," he shouted. "I'm your son." My father didn't move. "You stopped being my son when you betrayed this family," he said coldly. Claire stood too. "This is ridiculous." she said, but she sounded scared. You don't deserve anything, my father replied. You earned it at Dan's expense. Now get out. Issen and Claire exchanged a glance, unsure what to do. Finally, Issen let out a bitter laugh. This isn't over, he said, heading for the door. Claire followed, shooting me a hateful look. When the door slammed shut, I was left with my father, feeling like everything had changed. Dan, my father said, sitting beside me, I know it's a lot, but you had to know. I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. My father had cancer. My brother and ex were worse than I thought. And now everything my father owned would be mine. But I didn't feel joy, just a vast emptiness. My father went home soon after. I sat alone, processing it all. I knew Issen wouldn't stay quiet. He's always been selfish, always wanted everything. Now that my father cut him out of the inheritance, he'd fight. But something in me had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt I had to do something. Protect my father, honor his decision. If Issen wanted to fight, I was ready. The next week, I started noticing strange things. One morning, I found all 4 tires on my truck slashed, not an accident. Someone had cut them with a knife. I called the police, but without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Then, at the garage where I work as a mechanic, a customer mentioned a guy asking about me. Wanted to know what time I left. He didn't give a description, but it gave me chills. Issen was making moves. I didn't tell my father. He had enough to deal with, and I didn't want to worry him, but I stayed alert. I changed my routine, started leaving the garage through the back, always looking over my shoulder. But Issen didn't stop. One night, I was closing up the garage. It was late, and the parking lot was dark. As I walked my truck, I heard a noise like footsteps. I turned but saw nothing. I thought it was paranoia, but when I reached my vehicle, someone lunged in the shadows. A big guy in a hoodie, face covered, holding a bat. Don't move, he growled. I tried to run, but he swung, hitting my shoulder. The pain was like lightning. I tried to get up, but he hit my leg. This is a warning, he said. Back off, or next time you won't walk. Before I could respond, he ran off. I ended up in a hospital with a dislocated shoulder and a bruised leg. The police came, but I had little to tell them. No face, no cameras in the lot. But I knew who was behind it. Issen. No proof, but my gut didn't lie. From the hospital bed, I started thinking. Issen wasn't just trying to scare me. He wanted me out of the way. If I was gone, he'd be the sole heir when my father died. It was a sick plan, but classic Issen. When I got out, arm in a sling, I got to work. I wasn't letting him win. I bought a cheap security camera for my house's entrance, changed the locks, and started carrying a baseball bat in my truck. I wasn't getting caught off guard again, but Issen kept coming. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number, a photo of my house at night, taken from the street. The message read, "Next time, it won't just be a bat." I went cold. This wasn't just intimidation. It was a direct threat. I decided to talk to a friend in the garage, Mike, who knew a retired detective. I told him everything, leaving out the inheritance to keep it simple. Mike connected me with Ray, an older guy who listened to my story and said it sounded like harassment, but needed solid evidence to act. Watch everything, he said. Record, take photos, save messages. If this guy is as sloppy as he seems, he'll slip up. It didn't take long for Issen to escalate. One morning, I found my truck trashed, windows smashed, paint scratched with the word disappear. I called the police again, and this time, there was something useful. The camera I'd installed caught a hooded guy breaking the windows. His face wasn't visible, but the build matched the guy who attacked me. Ray said it was a good start, but not enough to arrest anyone. "We need to tie this to your brother," he said. Then Claire reappeared. She texted, saying she wanted to meet. I didn't trust her, but thought I might get something useful. We met at a cafe far from the garage. She was nervous, glancing around. "Issen's gone crazy," she said. "He wants the inheritance, Dan. He says if you're gone, he gets everything when Robert dies. He's got a guy working for him, someone who does dirty stuff. I think it's the one who attacked you." I asked why she was telling me. Because I'm scared, she admitted. Issen doesn't listen to me. I think he might even hurt me if I don't play along. I told her I needed proof. Claire promised to help, but I wasn't sure I could trust her. Still, I gave her Ray's number in case she wanted to talk to him. Things got uglier. One night, I heard a crash outside my house. I ran to the garage and saw smoke. My garage was on fire. I called the fire department, but the damage was done. My tools, my equipment gone. The police found traces of a Molotov cocktail. Luckily, a neighbor's camera caught a guy throwing it. The same hooded figure. Ray was thrilled. "This is attempted arson," he said. "With the attack and threats, we can push this." But I knew I needed something directly tied to Issen. That's when Claire came through. She emailed me screenshots of texts between her and Issen. In them, Issen talked about taking care of Dan and mentioned payments to a guy named Jimmy. It was gold. I gave it to Ray, who said he could trace the payments and dig deeper. I was exhausted, paranoid, but I wasn't giving up. I knew Issen wouldn't stop until one of us was out of the picture. I thought about my father, how the cancer was killing him, everything he'd sacrificed for us. I couldn't let Issen win. I decided it was time to tell my father everything. I didn't want to burden him, but I needed his help, and I knew he had the fraud evidence that could sink Issen. I went to his house one night. He looked weaker. The cancer was advancing fast. I told him everything. The attack, the threats, the fire, what Claire said, the texts. At first, he just listened, eyes fixed on me. When I finished, he stood, went to a drawer, and pulled out a folder. "It's all here," he said. "Bank statements, transfers, receipts. Proof Issen and Claire stole your mother's money." Then he looked at the texts I showed him. "But this," he added, "this is new and it's enough." He was furious, but didn't raise his voice. "Issen didn't just betray his family," he said. "Now he's trying to destroy you to take what isn't his. I won't let that happen." He looked at me with a determination that gave me chills. "I'm calling a lawyer. We're filing charges against Issen, fraud, threats, attempted assault, arson, everything. I don't know if I'll live to see him in jail, but I'll make sure he doesn't touch a cent of what I left for you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to stop him, to shield him from this weight, but I knew he was right. Issen had gone too far. I nodded, and my father put a hand on my shoulder. "You're my son, Dan. Always have been. We'll finish this together." I left that night, knowing the fight was just beginning. Issen was out there, planning his next move, but now, with my father and the evidence on our side, I felt we could win. I just hoped time was on our side. After telling my father everything, things moved fast. The next morning, he called Tom, his lawyer friend, and handed over the folder with the fraud evidence. Bank statements, transfers, receipts showing how Issen and Claire stole the money meant for my mother's treatments. I also gave Tom the text screenshots Claire sent, where Issen talked about taking care of me and mentioned payments to a guy named Jimmy. With that, plus the security footage of the garage fire and the report of the parking lot attack, Tom said we had a strong case. The police acted quickly. 2 days later, they arrested Issen at a motel on the outskirts of Denver. He was with a guy we suspected was Jimmy, the hooded figure who attacked me and set my garage on fire. They found cash, a phone with more incriminating texts, and even a receipt for the gasoline used in the Molotov cocktail. Claire, seeing everything collapse, agreed to testify against Issen in exchange for a reduced sentence for her role in the fraud. I wasn't surprised. She's always been the type to jump ship when it's sinking. The trial started a month later. My father was weaker every day, but insisted on being there. Seeing him in the courtroom, sitting with effort, broke my heart. The cancer was consuming him, but his gaze was pure steel. Issen, on the other hand, looked like a cornered animal. He tried playing the victim, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd borrowed my mother's money with plans to repay it. But the evidence was overwhelming. Tom presented the bank statements, showing direct transfers to Issen and Claire's accounts while my mother was dying. Then came the text where Issen talked about eliminating me to secure the inheritance. The fire video was a final blow, showing Jimmy throwing the explosive, with text linking Issen to the payment. Issen's defense argued there was no direct proof he ordered the attack or fire, but the jury didn't buy it. Claire took the stand and buried him. She said Issen planned everything, obsessed with the inheritance, and wouldn't stop at anything. When she finished, Issen glared at her with such hatred the judge had to intervene. I testified, too, recounting the attack, the threats, the fire. It was tough, feeling everyone's eyes on me, but especially my father's. I wanted him to see I hadn't given up, that I was fighting for him, for my mother, for our family. When I stepped down, my father gave my arm a squeeze. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. His eyes said it all. The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. Issen was found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, attempted assault, and arson. When the judge announced the sentence, 7 years in prison, Issen sat motionless, like he couldn't believe it. The last thing I saw before they took him away was his rage-filled stare fixed on me. I didn't feel joy, just relief. Justice was done, but at a heavy cost. My father didn't live to celebrate. A week after the trial, his health collapsed. The cancer had spread too far, and the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. We brought him home, where he wanted to be. I spent every day with him, helping however I could, talking about simple things, cars, football, summers when we were kids. Sometimes he'd look out the window and say, "I did the right thing, Dan. Your mother would be proud." I'd nod, a lump in my throat. One night, he called me to his room. He was in bed, barely able to speak. He handed me an envelope. "It's the will," he said. "Everything's yours, the house, the money, everything. But more than that, I want you to live, Dan. Don't let this stop you." I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. He took my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt everything would be okay, even if it hurt. He died that night, peacefully in his bed. He was 62. 2 months later, I'm sitting in my father's house, now mine. The will was executed without issues. The house, the savings, a plot of land I didn't even know about, all transferred to my name. Issen couldn't do anything from prison, and Claire vanished, probably starting over somewhere. But I don't feel victorious. I lost my mother, my wife, my brother, and now my father. The house is quiet, filled with memories that hurt as much as they comfort. I've tried to move on. I'm back at the garage, though I'm quieter, more cautious. My co-workers know what happened, but don't ask. Mike, my friend, invites me for beers on weekends, and sometimes I go, just to avoid shutting myself in. I've also started fixing up the house, painting walls, replacing old furniture. It's a slow project, but it keeps me busy. Sometimes when the day's done, I sit on the porch with beer, looking at the stars, thinking about my father, his last words, "Live, Dan." I'm trying. The other day, I found a box in the attic. Old photos, letters, stuff from when we were kids. There was a picture of my father, my mother, Issen, and me, all smiling at a picnic. I sat there staring at it, and for the first time in a long while I cried, not from anger, but for everything I'd lost. But I also felt something else, something like hope. My father left me more than a house or money. He left me his strength, his sense of what's right, and no one can take that away. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll sell the house. Maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll meet someone, or maybe not. But for now, I'm here, taking it one step at a time. Issen's in prison. Claire's gone, and my father rests in peace. I keep going because it's what he wanted. And because, after all, I'm still his son.